of naming this room after. Is this some sort of butterfly?
Oh,
Is it?
Carter Blue.
Yeah,
Okay.
like that's her name for it. I think she's trying to.
Liberty butterfly.
Yeah. She's trying to speak it into existence.
Sounds like Shepherd's program.
Yeah, that is not the official
Oh.
name.
You know, want to be extension. Like get it right, a little back, they're out there. Yeah, that's what they're. You didn't want to be like
the front and center? No, I don't have to.
Oh, this is all new. Harmless and endangered butterfly.
Halfway.
Covered in, originally believed to only live in pine barrens like the pine bush in this area.
No kidding.
But
Which we're just demolishing.
well, it's since been discovered to actually have a broader habitat that extends further down the east coast.
Okay.
But it's still pretty rare and still endangered. But this is not the only place. When it was first discovered, they thought this is its only habitat is in the Albany area and these pine barrens.
A local coming in with the facts for us.
This information? I knew that they lived in like that Pine Bush area because they had like a story walk out the blue.
Okay.
So I went with the kids on that like story walk. So excited about it. I did not know that they found out it actually goes farther than that.
We'll give, we technically have a quorum, but we'll give Bill maybe just 1 minute.
He probably doesn't realize that this is the room.
That's why I put it in the other message.
And I told everyone at the desks to look for confused board members.
Can they tell from our normal state?
No. I can also do a loop, let me go retrieve them.
I mean, I'll just go peek real quick and then we'll start after that, regardless of whether we see him or not.
Check in the meadow, maybe he went there.
That does seem like a more fun spot.
The floors, it's pretty sweet.
That's a, I wish I could put my card on that.
Which is my face. No winner. Do you guys ever go like lay down on it?
What way?
The
Oh,
meadow has
in
like
there?
heated floors.
Oh.
So like if it was like freezing in here, I'd just be like, you know.
I don't see him, so I say we just, oh,
You found us.
oh, he's right here. Like, oh, never mind. I don't know how I missed him. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Got a lot to play with too.
Some stress toys.
Take what room we can get. So.
Yeah, we are surprisingly popular on Wednesday nights. We were booked last week when we were looking to find a space, and I had to chase the kids out of this room ahead of time. So if we get a comment card that a mean man cut short their wee bowl, that was me.
Okay, well, we might as well go ahead and get started. Hopefully we can get through what we want to get through. I did send an agenda, but I didn't ask if anybody had anything else they wanted on the agenda, so we can talk about whatever else you would like to. So does anyone have anything they want on the agenda right now? Unless it occurs to you. So last time we established that we would like to survey and or do an activity with both the board and the staff, but we haven't quite decided on what we wanted to, what questions we wanted to ask in the survey and how we wanted to establish the activity. So I think getting the questions out is probably the first thing that we want to do. I had a couple of things on here because I had noted the information that I originally sent was those 3 questions on aspirations, challenges, and changes, which is what the board did last time. But then there was another suggestion of what we hope to accomplish and how do we get there is the 2 questions. And then there was another suggestion of changes that you would like to see in the next 3 years. So I don't know if you all have given this any thought and have any suggestions here.
So I guess in the next 3 years, kind of thinking of what some of the goals were for the director as well as some of the community feedback, it seems to be like they're more big events. Or like, there used to be some like annual things that would happen that I think we've stepped away from, is my understanding. Like there was like a gala And like something else, like remind me, I don't know.
Book sales were,
There's the book sales, there's a big one. So like bringing back sort of those like big, like notable events that people seem to be drawn to. We do a lot of like the day-to-day programming and stuff like that, but these sort of like, since we're a community hub, like a celebratory event type things.
and that's something we've been looking at internally because as we debriefed on Read or Treat, these events like require a village. It's like a full
Yes.
team effort to plan them.
Mhm.
So that's gonna build in kind of a limitation. Maybe we can only do 6 to 12 events of that scale a
Mhm.
year.
Yeah.
So we, at some point, we may have to prioritize, like, and that might be something for community feedback, which is more valuable to you, X or Y, because
Yeah.
we can only do so many.
Well, and I think like a sub bullet to that is more community engagement, because maybe instead of that all being library volunteers, we have community volunteers, we have representatives from other, kind of partnerships that we're hoping to build, so kind of bring in more folks instead of being siloed.
And I think we had sort of established, but correct me if I'm wrong, that we were thinking we would do the board piece and the library staff piece before doing the community piece. That is what we established at the last meeting. I can pull up my notes.
I think we're gonna send the questionnaires out separately to those groups, and then once we get the answers, because we don't want to influence one or the other, kind of whittling down those ideas and then kind of getting community buy-in to a smaller group of things instead of having it be like,
Right, I think, we're kind of thinking of like a two-step, right, where the first step is kind of generate the ideas,
Yeah.
and then the second
Well,
step is
is to get in-
prioritize.
Yeah.
yeah,
Which is,
So yes, we had talked about focusing on the board and staff involvement currently, and then community involvement would be next steps.
yeah. I'm still good with that, and I still think it seems
Okay.
good.
so I guess, is the question then how do we do the survey? Like, what's the format of like, what are the questions?
Yeah, so the questions, I mean, I think we had talked last time about sort of asking the staff and the board very similar things
Yeah.
or exactly the same so that we can establish the same sort of baseline and see where there's overlap between the two and where there's like complete divergence.
Right.
So I think what we need to do now, and so that we can get this out, is actually to figure out what does the survey look like? Are we only asking a few questions and allowing it to be more open-ended? Are we asking multiple questions, multiple choice? Like how do we want to format this? What do we think is actually going to solicit the most helpful feedback?
And I'd actually be curious to hear from Christina and Michelle, because you're closer to the frontline staff members. We talked about it a little bit at the staff meeting Tuesday morning, but what do you all think would work better to actually get responses from staff? And what do you think would make them feel heard?
It's hard. I don't like leaving things way too open because you'll just get a ton of information. You know, like, how do you sort through it? Some kind of, I guess, targeted activity that keeps people focused on a goal, like the goal of answering the questions or working towards what we want to know, but lets them provide honest feedback. I don't know. I don't know what that thing is though.
I think at staff development day, it felt pretty honest. When you just said that, about being honest, kind of maybe even working together in groups, but maybe you don't have to be in your department. To kind of broaden that if we did like a group activity more, where we wrote down things on Post-it paper and taped it to the wall. And then prioritized from there even with all of the ideas brought together as one. Which seems, I think that's kind of what the board did. It seemed like with.
Yeah, so we
What,
had
your
done the
survey and
survey
draft it?
piece first, and then we did the activity piece second. And the activity piece included results from the survey, but it doesn't have to be formatted the same.
But it was but in the staff development day, it seemed that was I felt that there were some really honest answers brought to the front.
That we
During the
wrote on pieces of paper.
Yes.
And then people put stickers next to
Yeah,
ones
little
they
stickers.
agreed with or they thought were important.
Yeah.
I don't know if that has a name, but
And that is
It's
essentially,
done.
yeah, the same thing that we did with the board is we took the concepts from the survey and they were all given docs and allowed to weight things on them.
And that's kind of how we did it. And I know it's hard to get everybody like that in one place to do something, but that was,
I mean, that's a logistics question of, we've been kicking around ideas, but it's really difficult to get everyone together in one place unless it's staff development day. But even if we spread it out over the course of the day, it's like, okay, in the morning we get half the staff, in the evening we get half the staff, and
Could you leave it out for a few days and then it's like, it's in Westbrook or it's in Hildebrandt on the wall or it's in the break room on the wall?
so
People
that is
come and
a
go.
really interesting idea because I had heard libraries do that with the public, where you put it out on like a board for the public, and you leave it up for a couple days. Would work as a concept with staff that if we said, hey, pop by the break room and make your thoughts heard.
and then it's kind of anonymous. It is kind of anonymous at that point.
Mhm.
And can,
So one question I had is, I mean, what kind of, I guess, how concrete, some of the ideas, things like getting the book sales running again or things like that, those are like kind of concrete ideas of, or like having big community events on a regular basis or things like that. When we did that exercise last year with the dots where we were putting on, those were a lot more abstract. It was kind of just, more conceptual, like focus on this or that, like relation with the community. I don't know, it was like very broad, like.
There was a few very specific things.
Okay.
A lot of it was concepts.
Right, and
And
so
that's-
I'm wondering, what are we going for here?
Yeah.
Are we aiming for the concrete because that's what we want to present the public and say, hey, what are your priorities of these? Or are we looking, or is it a mix, or is there something what's the output that we're trying to get from this is what I'm trying to think.
I personally would want to avoid putting out like, do public or staff, do you guys want book sales? Because I found that when we put out specifically a thing, everyone, whether they intend to actually go to it or not, is like, that sounds so nice. Of course I want book sales. So I think my opinion is we'd put out more abstract concepts, but then we would interpret what that means. And we could, if people are like, we want the ability to get materials in a permanent way from the library, or we want options for more materials, we might say like, I think that means book sales because we've been hearing that for a long time. Like,
So here's how I can see I see 4 buckets, right? You have concrete goals, like what concrete goals would you like to see in 1 year, 3 years, kind of a thing, or whatever. Are we doing a 5-year plan?
I think we're doing 3. And
So
I,
maybe
most
one.
of them are functional, like just as a range, because it makes it really difficult to follow, but I'm listening.
Yeah,
I'm here.
so here's the 4 buckets, like, just because people say they want it, there's a discussion into like, does everyone agree this could be achievable in a year, right? And so after discussion, you might be like, maybe that's a 3-year goal, or maybe it's past that. But we have 2 buckets for concrete. What are things that you want and think can happen in a year, want and think can happen in 3 years? And then what are your aspirational goals? So like, what are concepts you'd like to see, like the feel good feelings or things that you don't want? And that could be written in like a narrative kind of component of the long range plan. So like, what kind of aspirational feelings would you like to have about the library? And that, so then you can have those 2 different buckets and not worry about like, is this more conceptual or is this more like actionable?
I think, I think I agree 100% if you just give somebody a thing and say, do you want book sales? Like, do you want, this thing? Then people are just like, oh, well, that sounds good. So yes, and everybody's like, yes, on that. But I think I think something we had mentioned the last time too was it's a little different if we're asking people to kind of prioritize. If we give them a bunch of things and we're saying, prioritize, rank these, what are the things you like most, then it's not just like an up or down, well, that's more good than bad. So sure, it's more like, these are the things that I really care about because I'm putting them at the top of the list. And, with the, okay, here's a list of however many, a dozen things that any of which, would be good and people would like, but we can't do everything. So we're going to pick a few of these. What are the things, and vote, with that in mind.
I think that's the second activity, right?
Right, I agree.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah. So the first
But
one is
it's-
just an info dump and then.
Right, so I think the question is, I guess, like, I guess it's what questions do we ask in the first round to get the answers that we
That we
want
need,
to
yeah.
feed into the second round?
So-
So to get the answers we need to have.
Yeah, and I am all for conducting like long range planning like this. So like this is conceptual, and then we boil down to what the actual things are, but that doesn't work for everybody, and there's always gonna be people that say like, I want a book sale on the first Saturday in August, like, they're gonna say like specifics right at the beginning, so it's just like figuring out how to funnel it. But that's what statistical analysis software is for, is to help us break that down. So my preference would be to ask the sort of big picture at the beginning, just to see like broad range priorities, like more community events, I would still consider as like a broad range priority. But like, and then boil down to what that means later on, so that we can make actionable goals.
Bill, do you have thoughts?
So I would just, I'm sort of always a little bit puzzled by this because it's a library, okay, and we're sort of like, got the building, we got books, we got the programs, we got a range of things. And basically, to me, the long range plan is, what are we gonna do to continue along those main things that people associate with the library? But I sort of get the sense from the discussion that there are things that the library isn't doing that we should be doing, and I'm sort of puzzled as to what those things might be. So I sort of more favor towards, focusing on what the library does and finding out what people want to do about those things. And then, if there is some completely new field that we could go, we should be going into, that will somehow whether come out, or I keep harping on the, the library, New York Library Association meeting. If you didn't get it there, where else are you going to get it? So if there is something completely new on the horizon that Illinois Public Library isn't doing, then what is that thing? Okay, and let's be a little bit specific about it. So I sort of, go more towards the specifics on this. So what do people want to do about the collection in 1 year and 3 years? What do people want to do about, digital resources 1 year, 3 years?
But do you think that's the starting point or the ending point? So I agree that that's the goal, but is that where we start or is that where we end?
I can't see, I think that's it, maybe you would say, I'm saying that that's the start and end, because I don't really know what else we're gonna be talking. When I look at, what Tim's, last summary, he gave out a year ago, here's our last year plan, he annotated what we did. And to me, it was a lot of, well, that's what we did in planning the budget, and we followed through on the budget. At the end of the day, we did the things that were in the budget, but I didn't see really anything in there that was earth shattering in terms of, a long range plan that had something that was a completely new area that the library was going into. It was sort of like, okay, we executed on this. When you break it down, we executed on the budget every year and we got to this point. Okay, so what am I missing on this?
I don't think we should use that as our model.
Well, but I'm sort of at a loss. I'm very curious of what people, when you say we want to do more community events, well, we do community events now. I mean, how many do we do? Are we talking about, if we do 50 now, are we talking about doing 60? And how is the public going to communicate that? How's that going to come in terms of, feedback? I don't know.
Well, we might identify education opportunities in terms of educating the public on things we do, because if they're asking for things like, I want story times at 3 p.m. on Wednesdays and we have it, and that might just be one person that says it, but if 30 do and we do it, then that's not part of our plan, unless our plan is we need to advertise the things that we're doing better. And then that's the action item that comes out of that, not the initial, I want a story time 3. If we already have it, now we have to go, well, we already have it. 80 people asked for this. Why don't they know? That means maybe our outreach is the thing that we need to focus on. So there's takeaways.
Yeah, there are takeaways like that, but in the end, we are going to continue doing the community activity that we do. We just got to make sure people know more about it. And, that's okay, that's fine. But that wouldn't strike me as being what a long range plan is about.
So before we get too far afield, forgive me if we answered this last week, I just forgot. are the mission, the vision, and our core values up for consideration.
Yes, but at the end, that's what we had
Yeah,
decided.
we're gonna
Yeah.
loop back around. Okay,
I think we had established that for sure.
that sounds correct, because it's a question of, because because I think I supported that actually, because it was like, we're gonna see what everyone says, and that might inform what our mission and vision looks like. It might be easier to get more concrete answers waiting with the mission and vision and asking the staff what, like, this is our current mission and vision. Which of these would you emphasize? Which would you change? Are these still our, like, what core values fit into our mission and vision? Because like looking at ours right now. So the mission is equal access to physical and visual materials, programs, and services to our community for lifelong learning, cultural enrichment, and enjoyment. We're gonna be able to take each one of those as a piece and say, okay, lifelong learning, what does that look like to you? Cultural enrichment, what does that look like to you? Because if we're worried about, we're gonna get, I do think that we should ask some open-ended questions to get like a catch-all of something that we're not even considering.
Are we still, just to clarify, are we still talking about staff and board?
Staff and
service?
board.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Because I think, you know, once we drill it down to what the staff and board kind of agree are priorities, like as an example, we on staff have been talking about outreach since I got here. We think that's our top priority. We're like, we should be out in the community. We should probably make sure staff are bought into that. And what does that look like to them? But then it's also kind of a question of the public of like, that becomes a value statement. What do you value more? Coming to the library for library services, the library coming to you? You know? Like,
So should we, this doesn't answer the initial question that you posed, like, what are we asking? Should we, though, based on what you were just saying and something kind of Alicia was touching on, should we flip this and survey the community first and then we go from there? Because isn't that the whole point? Like, don't look at me like that. I mean, you shouldn't, but the questions still need to be, like, it can't just be a free for all, but like, that's how we know if we're already providing and we don't need to change too much about what we do, or if they.
Well, and one thing maybe that, you know, it's not, doesn't always have to be, you know, doing something new. It might be kind of, you know, more or doing better something that we're already doing. Like for, you know, for example, if, you know, people, you know, I don't use this, so I don't know if this is still a big concern, but I know there's a lot of people were complaining like last year about on the digital borrowing that there was super long waiting lists for like everything they wanted to borrow in there. So, you know, if that's still an issue or something that people were complaining about, then it's, well, okay, maybe we need to prioritize, you know, trying to, you know, improve our subscription or putting more resources into that so that, you know, people aren't having that problem if that's something a lot of people care about, things like that. So it's not doing something new, it's just kind of prioritizing where we allocate our resources to the things that people, you know, care about the most or whatever.
a thought I've been having is if we reach out to the public every 3 years when we do a long range plan, in a perfect world, every 3 years, we're gonna get a snapshot of how they feel, and they're gonna get out of practice of giving us feedback, and we're gonna get out of practice of receiving it. I'm wondering if, regardless of how this turns out, we should probably incorporate continuous feedback into what we do. Like there's library services out there that as part of your email campaign will reach out to customers and be like, hey, just give us your feedback. And then they give you kind of a snapshot of what they said.
Mhm.
So regardless of what we do with this particular process, I think continuous feedback is probably something we should incorporate. At the risk of taking us in a complete cul-de-sac circle, do we have a sense of what question we want answered? Is there a big, hairy, what's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything question that we want answered?
I personally do, and that's why I proposed the set of 3 questions that we had asked before, because I think it's helpful in understanding what we want to be, what's stopping us from being that, and how do we get there. Like I think that for me, that's the core of what we actually want to know.
But are the public gonna know what's stopping us?
I respectfully disagree. I don't want to survey the public first. The only, and you can advocate for it, I'm not going to stop it. I just, in having done this process both ways, there are so many more pieces to it when the public comes in that it's like impossible to take that massive feedback if you get a lot and condense it into something that the board and staff can work with. I agree, the public should have an open-ended space to say things we didn't know about, but like, I'm just hesitant, but maybe we won't get that much public feedback and maybe it won't be that big a deal. So you can keep advocating for it.
Mhm.
Please know that just because I'm disagreeing doesn't mean I can't change my mind.
It's hard to fight for it when I'm not sure what we're asking yet, but I think, I don't know, of what you've got on the agenda, I like your aspirations, challenges, and changes
Mhm.
the best so far, like the other questions. I don't know if it would help to pick, like, what are we asking, and then I can better conceptualize, like, how that plays out, and if what I posed makes sense.
So as someone who has to ask for constant feedback from literally everyone all the time at my job, it's maybe best to keep it something simple, and this is the one I use every 2 weeks, every 6 months, every month, whatever, and it's, what do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? What do you want to see that doesn't exist? And what do you want stopped? And then that's it. And then I feel like that's broad enough, but it gives people parameters, like, what is something they're doing that we want to see more? Did they already do events? I want to see more. Do they not do this at all? I want to see that. And then we have four buckets, and then we can at least like kind of go from there. And then we like dot both those different sections separately and then bring them all together once those are whittled down.
Say the first part again, see more of, see less of.
See more of, see less of, have added, or however you want to word that, like
Something new.
something new, and what to stop. So if they're like, every single time I walk through the front door, the lady at the front desk slaps me across the face. I hate it every time. Can they not do that? Great.
See more of it.
I want to see more of it, please, card. But I feel like I get good answers from that because I feel like that's,
I think that's a good approach because it does speak to, here's what the library does, and that's the first two questions go to. Here's what the library, something that we're not thinking about with you, a new direction, and then
Yeah.
the stop thing is, yeah, let's just do it.
sometimes that's important because maybe we're doing something and we're just like, man, everyone hates it and it's never told us.
That would cover the bases.
And
People would answer the first two in context of what they experience on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis here.
And if we're starting where we're originally thinking to start, I think that that's broad enough, but also specific topics all of us can maybe speak to. And then at least spearhead conversation. And then maybe things switch buckets or something. Like I said, there's a little bit of education that might be in there. Some of the board might not know all the things y'all already do.
Mhm.
So we might ask for something, hey, start doing this, and you're like, we already do that, like, and so then we can kind of simplify those buckets and then we take that to the public. If we go that route versus public down, I don't have experience with a lot of public feedback, so I can't say whether I think one way is better than the other, but it makes sense both ways, so.
And there's no perfect way to do public feedback.
There is none, and we might find out, it might be a lesson learned that like, whoops, we got it wrong this time. And the good thing about long range plans is you revisit them every 3 years. So I'm not gonna get stuck on like, are we doing it perfect this time? We might just take away a lesson learned. At the end, we do like a roll up out to the public and say, hey, this was our approach and here's what we learned went great. Here's what didn't go great. Here's what we accomplished. And then the next long range plan, we tweak it.
And
And
that
it's
will
not the end of the world.
tie back into the mission. Because if people are concerned about the digital holes on Libby, we'll see that with digital material, their access to digital materials. We want more big author events. Oh, we want that. We want more cabarets and concerts. You're not doing that anymore, however it breaks
Yeah.
down. But that will then show their priorities within the mission statement as well.
Yeah.
Is it a way to combine both Alicia's and Corey's ideas together? Because what Corey gets is the aspirational things and Alicia is talking about the more tangible things.
It could be
And
5
if you
questions.
combine those two
One to
things
see.
together, I think you cover all the bases in terms of, here are the values that the community, that we, the trustees, the staff, and then ultimately the community aspire to. And,
Well, yeah, so maybe, we have those 4 kind of concrete questions and maybe we add 1/5 question that is more abstract, is more, what is your, vision of what the library should be, or what is your aspirations for, I don't know, I don't know what's the right way to word it, but
Mhm.
one question that kind of invites them to give something that's a little more abstract.
What do you value most? Like, we'd have to find a way to word it.
Yeah,
That's not like,
I'm not sure what.
We're getting at
Like, when
value,
I think about my
Yeah.
library, I feel,
or when I think about
Well,
the library, it's the most important.
yeah.
I want to feel.
Yeah, yeah. I really like Alicia's 4 buckets. I'm all in on it. You're waiting for me to say.
I like
That
validation.
only- And that's the only piece that I'm missing. And I just think of it like is sort of like a bigger picture, like throw out your random wacky ideas. Cause I just think about this in my last strategic plan. I had no clue that people were having such difficulty, that there was no pipeline into our profession and that they were having trouble hiring. And it didn't happen until I asked for broad range ideas that we could come up with a concrete internship plan to help with that goal. So like, I just don't know where that would have landed, like in those questions. It's a totally different environment, but I'm just trying to think of those like broad range things that people throw out. Think on that, you're gonna come back to us with a great good question.
I'll think about it. But yeah, I've seen that work really well. I literally did it twice today because I have 2 teams, so I do it every 2 weeks, but it's that conversation piece that brings out the extra. So I have everybody fill out stickies on a board for those 4 ideas, plus we have a little bonus kudos section, which is always adorable. But we end up talking about way more than what's on the stickies.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people have just what's in front of them at the time, and they might not remember 4 months ago they were really annoyed by something, or they attended something and they loved it. And then as you're talking through things, that's why I think those group activities kind of beneficial. You're hearing things that you might not have considered, and then that's where you'll kind of see the things trending, and then that's when you do that dot vote.
Yeah.
So if everyone's like, oh, I totally even forgot that happened, now that they're seeing all the answers in front of them. And I think there was feedback from someone, I don't remember if it's this committee or not, that they had wished the board activity, they had seen the categories in advance so they could have thought on it instead of doing it in the spot, because there's things they might have put a dot on differently.
Yeah.
But being able to see those answers, you might be like, oh my God, I totally forgot.
Yeah,
that, like-
absolutely. And that's why I like the concept of doing these 2 separate but intertwined pieces.
Yeah, I think the
But
group.
I think it was Bill that brought up that we hadn't seen the stuff in advance, which was accurate. And so I think that would be important.
Yeah. I will come out in the conversation, so someone just has to like monitor, capture the things that like are talked about and aren't on stickies necessarily, because that spearhead or spirals into
Yeah.
new things, I guess.
Do you think that most staff members could relatively easily answer these 4 questions? I like them. What were they? It was,
Do more of, do less of, start, stop.
Yeah.
I like them. I think so.
Thanks, agile methodologies that somebody else came up with, not me. So, yeah.
And then do you think staff would be able to answer a question about values or what they think is most important about libraries? What, do you have any thoughts on how we could word that in a way that would make sense and get correct answers from
Did you
them?
type down, it's like when I think of my library, I want to feel
Mhm.
like that. I have to think about it, think on it. Do you have anything? But I feel like when I
Your
think
stuff is
about
gonna
my
go over
workplace, I
come
want
out
to
with-
feel
We're gonna get
something.
every single
Yeah.
answer on the planet.
So this, I wonder if the staff will answer this in terms of like a place to work and also as a library, and do we want them thinking about both of those things at once? Separate, only the part about like library, like what do you, I guess,
I
how
think
do you
each
want?
group's gonna give
I-
vastly
I
different.
think, I think when we go out to the public to kind of survey them, they're not gonna have the internal perspective. And so the things that they're ranking or that they're concerns is gonna be outward facing things. But I think when we're looking at our plan for, what we're looking to improve or do or whatever over the next 3 years, like internal concerns that are important, that aren't and obvious should still be in the mix. So like, when we're surveying the staff, it makes sense to collect that stuff, whether that makes sense to expose out to the public because it's not something they kind of experience or have anything with. I don't know if that makes sense, but at least for us to consider in the plan.
I do, I might have a good idea. Hold on. Okay, sorry. I did this for marketing on a website, and it sounds really funny that that's what it made me think of. But thinking that all these three groups are gonna give vastly different answers here, I think maybe we just have three pieces of the long-range planning that's geared towards staff, board, or whoever in the community. And just say like, as a staff member, I wanna feel blah, if that's like how we're crafting the statement. So there's like three kind of separate visions, and then like collaboratively or collectively, we value this. If there's like an emerging concept that comes out of all three. It's called it's called a user persona, but you can call it something.
Yeah, staff could be looking at this as how, it's really, you're not gonna
Yeah.
separate yourself into a library user. You're gonna say, how do I feel about Gilder Public Library?
As an
I work, hey, I'm an employee here.
Yeah.
And
So you might end up with three separate vision statements for the library, like we as the staff have this goal of this for our library. We as a board or leadership or whoever have this vision for our library, and we as a community have this vision for our library. We can have three different
Yeah.
things that we're working towards. It's gonna be hard to mush it all together. That's
I
the
mean-
nightmare I'm envisioning.
but it might not.
It might be all aligned, maybe,
It
but.
might, yeah, it might.
But I think that's an implementation thing at the end when we're writing it all up, is like maybe everybody's saying the same thing and then it's just one blurb. But if,
That's why we do Venn diagramming later on. That's our next step back.
Yeah, there's gonna be some level, of this, especially with staff and
Yeah.
with the public to a certain extent, we're gonna get hyper specific answers that we're then gonna have to
Yeah.
like bucket.
I want a
Like-
10% raise.
What is that? Yeah.
Well, yeah, because, you know, our staff,
Community member.
our staff members are legitimately gonna say things
Maybe.
like, you know, I want my paycheck to be correct. It's like, okay, what buckets does that fall into? Accountability.
Mm,
You know, okay, now we got a bucket, now we got a stew going, you know?
I do like buckets.
Mhm.
I would, as far as like the how you want to approach this, I sort of agree with Michelle that I don't think you can separate the fact that like I work here from I would agree with.
Because my library is not this library.
Exactly.
I've been there once. I was very lucky to meet Nate there, which brought me to this library, but I would never go back because their friends of their library were so mean. I would not go back there, and it was not welcoming. There were no study, it was just not a happy
So
place.
your goals for your library is different than your employment.
Yeah.
Right,
And it's probably less than half the staff live in Gilderland.
Yeah.
so.
So they're gonna have, their statement is gonna be different. And like I said, there might be a shared vision that seems to span all things, like everybody says more or less the same thing, but then there's gonna be these other areas you don't wanna ignore necessarily if they're like very prevalent, so.
So dumb question, can I clarify with you, Michelle? So if, like, actually liked what you said about you want your library to be more welcoming, because, you know, kind of, because you said the problem was that they're not welcoming. So if we asked you that question, I want my library to be X, and we didn't give you any more context, would you answer welcoming because you're talking about your home library, or would you have a different answer because you're thinking my library I work in?
I would be thinking of my home library
Okay.
because this is where I work and I love it here. And this is what I would want for my home library. Now, it could be that way on another day or whatever, but it just was not that day.
Mhm.
And, but I would not think of this as my necessarily library, even though it is, but I would be filling out something in the break room and this is my workplace.
Mhm.
So here I'm like staff, then I'm.
Well, and I think that will just be clarified in the introduction to the survey. Like we are talking about GPL, we are talking about you putting your staff hat on from or whatever we're gonna do, or like choosing. Yeah,
I guess it just resonated with me because I don't want to lose that insight. I wouldn't,
Yeah.
I would want you to say, like, I want my library to be welcoming, even if you were thinking about your.
What if you worded it as my perfect library? It doesn't have to be yours, but my perfect library would have this, would be this, would feel like this.
The Gilderland Elementary gave us pools when they built their Lego libraries.
Oh, that's right.
Many of them had pools.
Their ideal library.
I feel library had pools and Star Wars and.
Some weird, yeah, sure. I wish it had a Millennium Falcon at it. Sure,
I
sure.
wish it was called Library in the Library.
Yeah, library, oh, it's such a good name, but in the code base.
So trying to keep us on task. So are we all comfortable with moving forward with this 5-question piece of the survey, knowing there will be an activity connected to it once the results come in.
Yes.
And separating the staff and the board into 2 pools at the current time.
Yes.
Okay. Yay. So then, so I did have like the timing piece in here. We want to run these concurrently.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason
Yeah.
to separate it out. Okay. When is a good time for people to complete a short survey? And, like, when should we release this and how long should we leave it open?
So I'm guessing if we do it anytime between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we'd want to leave it open for a while because I'm guessing people have vacations planned and their hearts and minds might not be here. So I would think either we wait until after the holidays and we do it for a short period of time, or we do it now and leave it long.
Does it say after the holidays?
Like we were talking about the first of the year?
Yeah.
Sounds the plan. That's you delayed.
That makes me nervous.
So what people are gonna say,
I know. It makes me nervous timeline wise.
If is there,
That was my concern. I want to say after Christmas.
You have to weigh the timeline, like people are distracted and they're like just sweating.
I mean, we've got a couple of weeks before, like between Thanksgiving and the Christmas holiday, and I feel like if we leave it open too long, people will forget about it, and then we're gonna be chasing them to be like, fill it out.
My survey manager would say never leave it open longer than 14 days.
I was thinking 2
And like,
weeks.
yeah, the 2nd through the 13th of December, the first 2 weeks.
Mhm.
That's like a little less.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm gonna
One,
complete it whenever it comes
8,
out.
9, 10, 11, or to the 16th, but
Yeah,
catch them
short.
before a lot of vacations probably.
yeah.
I think it's short enough. It should hopefully be. I don't know. Do you want to give staff an extra 15-minute break?
Well, and I mean, we'll run a test on timing too, and so we can say this is estimated minutes to complete or what have you.
Yeah.
And yeah, oftentimes staff, when they're working their desk shift, that's something they could do at their computer. They have a computer in front of them. They can stop to help people, you know. We've recently made our comment form not anonymous. Do we want to maintain anonymity to ensure honest feedback, or do we want to say, please attach your name? We took away anonymity so that we could follow up with people, because people would ask us things we needed context
From the public or from the staff?
from staff.
I mean, I would think, you know, anonymous would be nice just so people will give us more honest feedback, but it'd be nice if we could just track who has responded so you can bug them and say, hey, can you go fill out this thing? But once your answers are in, it's anonymized and not attached to anybody. I don't know if that's easy to do with the things we
Not
have
really,
available.
not with the software that we have, like those visible options.
And since we'd be asking staff to do it on shared computers, we can't do like, oh, this IP already responded, you know, because.
I mean, I can double check. When the only experience that I have doing any sort of surveying of staff here is when we solicited feedback on the director candidates, and that was anonymous, and we did not track anything.
Are we using something you have available to you?
So
or
I
are
don't
we
have
using,
anything
like,
that's extra special, so we would probably
Like
just
Google
use Google Forms.
We could, we could just know the number of people we sent it out to, and then you can see the number of responses, and then just.
You just
keep
have to-
nudging people in email.
Yeah, you would just have to lean on like managers to. Impart on their people how important it is and just say, hey, if we don't hear your voice, like. I don't know that we can address any issues you may have. I don't know. I mean, are we gonna get 100% participation? Probably not, so. But what will we consider a measure of success? 70% or more? Like realistically?
Oh, that's really good percentage.
I mean, it is really good, but I'm hoping that people will find this
We should
important.
get that.
Yeah.
Having this opportunity to give feedback in a new, it's kind of new, new director, new vibe, new year.
I think that we had like 37 responses on director candidates, so not everybody had seen all the
And
presentations.
I don't think there was a lot of pushing on that. We just said it was open and people did it, but I don't know how heavily encouraged that was. I'm hoping with encouragement, we double that and then we have good input from there.
you know, when you read the questions he's brought, buckets, Lisa, that you come up with, people get that in their inbox or however they see it. You know, how much time do we think they're gonna spend? Or what frame of reference are they gonna have for thinking about, okay, I gotta think about these questions and then sit down and answer it. It's easier when you have a list of things. You go and click, boom, that gets us.
One thing you can do is you can send an email in advance of the survey opening up and say, next week, we're gonna start a survey and it's gonna ask you these 5 questions. Look for the link.
Yeah.
And you send-
need to give them some context though, in terms of. things
And then
thinking
there's,
about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should just introduce it. I mean, like, and explain to them what's going on. You know, we're lucky that we have 3 folks on the staff too that they can ask questions of. But like context for why we're asking those
Yeah,
questions.
why we're, put this thing in context, what we want to get is your ideas about these major categories, but think about the library as you experience it, but, just wonder when this gets opened up on somebody's desk, and they got a timeline, how much are they gonna pay attention to the timeline to get it done, and then, they dump stuff into it.
So in terms of context, I think a lot of our staff will get it, like they're pretty engaged, in libraries, philosophy and operations. We could provide the whole long range plan as like it informs a document that looks like this.
Yeah,
You know?
do we want it to look like this, though? I don't want to steer them.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like,
I don't want this-
Like this, but better.
Yeah, I mean, we could send them.
So I just think that it's gonna take some leadership, I think, by you, Pete, to, put this message to your staff, and then they gotta send it down.
Mhm.
But, by the time it gets to the end of the grapevine,
Right.
to what extent is the message really getting there? I would just say that, maybe the 3 of you are gonna need to do some extra effort over the course of that week and just making sure that you had FaceTime with everybody on the staff, so they sort of understand this, not just let it go into the inbox and then 2 weeks later say, time's up.
Right.
Here's what, this is gonna take some leadership staff time to talk to almost every individual about one-on-one almost. Did you do this? You know what you're looking for, what we're looking for, and to make sure that they understand what it's about.
Mhm.
I just think, that type of elbow grease on the part of the management here, would go a long way, I think, to making sure we get some quality responses.
Yeah, no, it's the personal touch. Like I think we covered that saying of how many times you have to touch somebody before they respond. It's like 7 times.
Yeah.
As I'm with that, I think you guys are gonna be our best advocates. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, like, when we share that information, because if the wording that's coming from different people is skewed in different directions, it's also gonna produce different results.
Mhm.
Like, so, as long as we're all on the same page, I think that's gonna be good.
Yes, I mean, I don't think it'll be challenging to explain to them why it's important that we hear from them. I just think we have to, stay on message of like how to not guide them to like, this is the kind of answer we're looking for, like to not go that way, but to be like, these are the kind of questions we're gonna ask. This is what we mean by it.
Have any questions about the things that you're looking for? Just make sure that, I just think that you can't get around. I think that personal touch would go a long way towards, so you could spend a lot of time in emails and whatever, giving instructions and whatever, but that personal touch will get chased a lot quicker.
Exactly. Something that I've experienced with our staff is they do drill down very quickly to specifics, like when we say like, hey, you can't wear open-toed shoes at work, they're like, does that mean sandals? Does that mean flip-flops? And it's like, you're drilling way too specific. So I can see the same thing happen here that we just need to be careful of when we say like, what do you think we should do more of? They're like, what do you mean? And we'll just have to be very clear about what the question's asking.
I mean, you can tell them the goal of it, and then honestly, you might just get some weird answers, and that's
Yep.
okay.
Yeah,
But if you put a bug in
Yep.
their ear, and then those you just filter out, you know what I mean? So I'm not stressed about it. I think people want to, is there one? I'm so sorry, I kind of like had that like pop, but I just. I'll drink for I feel that tickle in my throat.
Yeah.
For like 20 minutes, and I don't want to do that.
And we're, at least the little ones,
I could just like.
Those little plastic ones.
That's cool.
Crap.
And I think,
There might be a mug in the staff cabinet too that nobody owns, like a black mug in the staff.
I don't open the side.
This is the.
okay, I made it.
It'll stop the cop.
And honestly, I think that we really at this point just have to see what happened. Because
Yeah.
we're like predicting the future and so I think we see how it goes. And just because people choose to or to not fill out the survey initially doesn't mean they're going to choose to do the same thing when it comes to an activity.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not sweating it.
yeah.
I think we'll get enough responses. I think most people more or less would get why they're doing it. And then we get some weird answers, they get filtered out.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna be the only one who wrote that. And we're gonna have to hone in on stuff that has multiple of the same answers anyway. So I think that'll be good. We're not
Okay.
getting a grade. So it's
So we have the basis for these 5 questions that we're going to ask. And based on the conversation that we've had, I will draft some introduction language that can go into this. And then I guess we just, I'll email that to everybody. I know that we're not to conduct business through email, but we've already gotten down to the heart of what we're interested in. So people can weigh back in on any suggested changes through email. I know now it's going to be difficult to have us come back together before the survey comes out.
I am, but if I have to.
I know, I was gonna say, Mike, I knew had to leave at 6:20. Thank you.
And everybody, have a good night, Mike. Thank you. The good news is that unprompted and unsolicited, I did mention this during our staff meeting on Tuesday. So I was like, hey, it's really important that when this comes out, you participate. So hopefully that landed. Maybe?
Yeah. And I mean, and I can't speak collectively from the entire board, but on behalf of, I think, a lot of us, if not all of us, we want to hear what you guys think. Like, this is not this is not performatory. We actually want to know what you're thinking is going to work. Alicia doesn't care.
That's what I'm known for.
You care too much.
I care.
Okay. Is there anything else that we should be thinking about now?
I can't remember if I mentioned this last time, but the director of the Altamont Public Library is very interested in whatever we end up doing. He has thoughts
I know,
and
I've already met with
feelings.
him.
Yeah. And they went through this, I think, last year.
Yeah.
They went through theirs. So Altamont is a subsection of Gilderland.
Has he reached back out recently?
I talked to him at the NILA conference and he reminded me.
I'll call him.
I also ranked him at voting.
I know you don't.
Business card.
I think what they did was wonderful and worked perfectly for Altamont. It's a very small community and it's very focused and it worked great for them. I think it's going to be difficult to replicate it among 30-some thousand people as opposed to Altamont. But I'm open, if you all would like, we can invite Joe to come talk to us. Otherwise, I can get a summary of kind of what Altamont wanted and see if there's any areas you're interested in pursuing. What would you prefer?
I'm curious what you did.
Okay.
But in person or?
Yeah, would you like for him to come?
I don't know.
Okay, I'll reach out to Joe.
If nothing else, I would just be curious, not only what they did, because I'm sure it was wonderful, but like, what is he looking for? What would he use our plan for? If,
Oh, I didn't realize he had any intention of using our plan.
Well, if not, then that would also be good to know, but like,
Yeah,
it's a reciprocal thing. We're not just looking
Yeah.
to steal their good ideas.
yeah.
Is he looking to learn something about our community?
Our good ideas.
Let me see if I can find some of the information from.
While you're doing that, can I tell a cute story related to our library? So my daughter is a Girl Scout and she's a junior, and this year they have to do their bronze award. So their first stage of their finding a project they're all going to do together to help the community was to go observe community areas. And every single kid on their community areas came up with something, but the girl that went to the library was like, I went to the library and I didn't find anything that I felt could be done better. And I was just like,
What are we doing?
and I thought that was so sweet because there was like kids that went to parks that were saying like, oh, this park could use more benches, or they went to schools and said, oh, I saw a little library and it was like dilapidated or whatever it was. And she went to the library and she was like, I didn't see any like huge community needs that were like not being met, kind of a thing. And I was like,
Nice.
and her mom, who obviously has them on the board, is like, sounds like they're doing a good job of it. I'm like,
I'm going to forward everybody this message from Joe that is from almost a year ago, December 11th, about this, and he talks a lot about their process. Their plan is quite lengthy, and the introduction talks about it, but I'm gonna also follow back on him. Okay, if we don't have anything else to do, I'll send a draft of that stuff out to you all for feedback and changes and corrections and whatever else you want to do with it.
So this is an intro to, this is like an introductory to what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then.
and then-
we do the like when do we craft the survey?
Oh, so then I was just gonna do a draft of those questions based on, I mean, very, very basic. I don't think, what would you like to see us stop doing? You know, like, I mean, really that format. So I'll just send that along, like when I work on the introduction, if that works, and see, because I'm not sure other folks, namely Pete, probably have a good idea for how to put that aspirational piece in there.
Mhm.
So I need to sleep on it.
I'm good.
Okay.
And we want the staff to look at this as staff, even if they are a Guilderland card holder, but they're looking at this as, I work here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's not separate that part of their mindset.
They might have some as a community member input, but yeah.
But I also
typical
think that at that point, we can send a note to the staff and say, are you a Guilderland resident? Here's the community feedback piece too, as a community member.
Yeah.
Because then that doesn't give any more weight to their opinions as a community member than it does any other community member, because
Yeah.
that's the lens that they're
Mhm.
going through.
So they'll just fill it up twice if they want.
Yeah, because I don't think the community survey is gonna look exactly like this,
Okay, that's fair.
so. Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you all. I hope to have this to you out, the draft of this out tomorrow or Friday, because then I am gone all of next. In a land with no internet.
Well, really.
My parents live in a wonderful land that, they have internet, but it's on one old desktop computer and it's wired.
Do they still have the AOL sound?
It doesn't do that, but it's pretty close. The computer is like 15 years old.
So
So
you
it's
know,
up
I
and-
recently found out you could have turned that sound off the whole time.
No.
Yeah,
I'd miss it.
I mean, I didn't know that either. So those days are long gone.